Watching my Facebook, YouTube, or our mobile app, on our website. We are East Coast Church here in Ringwood, New Jersey. We meet every Sunday at 10 o'clock here at the Skyline Lakes Fire Department. If you're near, I'd love to see you. We started a series before Easter on preparing for death, and we had 2 sessions before that. If you're watching my video and haven't seen those 2 sessions, you can go on our YouTube channel and look up East Coast Church NJ and find them there, or you can go to our mobile app, East Coast Church from Ringwood, New Jersey. Those videos are all there for you as well. So today we're talking about, this will be our 3rd session on preparing for death. And this one's been subtitled Getting Things in Order. Everybody say order.
Order.
So here's some previous thoughts, some kind of summarize what we went over the last couple sessions. We should plan for our death in this lifetime. We should plan for it. We should discuss death while we're still healthy, or some things we talked about before. There are no rules to follow in regards to death. God lets us decide and make some decisions. We should make it easy for our loved ones to go on in life after we die. Make it easy on them, not make it harder on them. The Spirit of God will help us plan for death. And one reason we're going through this series is all the years I've been in Christian, since 1979, I've never been in church service once, even those I preached in, where people talked about death and how to prepare to die. And yet it's part of our life. And so that's why we're teaching on this subject today. The Spirit of God will help us plan for death. We serve a life-giving God, but yet He'll help us plan for our death here in this lifetime. It's pretty remarkable when you start thinking about that. And when something like this happens, God's grace and His mercy will pour out when a Christian dies, and heaven will rejoice. We may grieve and mourn on the earth, but heaven will rejoice. The Bible says there's a great celebration that happens every time a Christian enters into heaven. All of heaven takes note. We should talk about death with our loved ones. It's not something we shouldn't talk about, yet a lot of people do not talk about it. And we should share, respect each other's thoughts on death. We start talking about death with our families, spouses. We should be able to share back and forth and share each other's thoughts and listen. And it's kind of interesting. People plan for their vacations more than they plan for their death. You know, when we go on vacation, we get all those things down pat. I mean, we went to Williamsburg, Virginia a week ago. So we knew, Pastor Kim's a great packer. So she does all our packing. So she had to pack for the weekend here and some other things that we were doing up here that weekend, and then have us packed for Williamsburg, Virginia. We knew exactly when we eat after church, what highways we take, the whole 9 yards. In great detail, as well as once we got there, where we're playing golf at, where we're eating at, very detailed. And we seem to do that when we go away on vacation. But yet for some reason in the church, we haven't done that well as far as doing detailing our death and what things should take place when we die. Kind of amazing when you think about that. And that's something we shouldn't just say, well, I'll do it later, think about it later. Always remember this. What I'm about to say, never forget it. People never die at a convenient time. No one dies at a convenient time. And so we're all going to die this lifetime once, unless we're ushered out of here. And it's never a convenient time for anybody. So remember that. And one thing we've noticed, me and Pastor Kim noticed in the last probably 2 years, particularly with some people we know, when there hasn't been plans, sometimes when there has been plans, but even when more so when there hasn't been plans, when money's left over, families are destroyed because of how the lack of planning didn't include how the money would be distributed. And we've literally seen families destroyed in the last 2 years, people we know personally, because they didn't plan properly. And when there's money involved, I mean, we've seen family members who had nothing to do in the last 20, 30 years with their family, and suddenly they want all the money. And suing and taking family to court to get what they want, all because they didn't plan well enough. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. And we're not here to tell you what to do. I'm here today to instruct you what some tools are available to you, some things that should be available, some things you need to think about. You and your family have to decide for yourself what's best for you. But I'm going to show you, not only from God's Word, but also some practical things today that can get your thinking process started if you haven't started it, so that you can get things in order, so that when you leave the earth, no matter when that is, people behind you won't have a hard time. It'll be a lot easier for them. Does that make sense? So that's where we're going through this today. As we go on, think about this a minute. When you die, who is it the hardest on?
Children.
Now, he said children. Tony said children. It might be for you. It could be for Tony. It could be children. It may not be for you. What if you didn't have kids?
Spouse.
Someone said spouse. That could be true. For somebody else, it could not be true if you're single. So the answer to this question is different for a lot of people because a lot of people are in different places. Not everybody's married. Not everybody has kids. So it could be the hardest on your kids, your grandkids, your spouse. It could be hardest on some other family member or friend, employer, employee. The answer to that question, here's the key to this. The answer to that question determines the path you're going to take in your preparation. I'll say that again. The answer to this question guides the planning process, how you prepare to die. The answer to that question. So for me right now, the hardest person it would be on for me would be my wife. And after her, my kids, and after them, the grandkids. But she comes first above all the rest of them. Not the kids, not the grandkids, she comes first. And so you have to understand that answering that question is very important to you because that starts and guides your planning process. Make sense? Now, 1 Corinthians 14:40. Be sure that everything is done properly and in order. Everybody say order.
Order.
So God, we've said the first two sessions, we'll say again today, God's a God of order. Ecclesiastes 3:2, there's a time to be born and a time to die. So there's seasons in our lives. God's entire kingdom has order to it. We've seen that in times past. God's creation has order. God's family has order within it. God's plans have order. And God's commands have order within them. Yes, God is a God of order. And so how a person, since God's a God of order, one thing that can affect the order is how a person dies. How a person dies can affect the planning process. Let me give you an example. Somebody who dies suddenly, there was no indication they were even close to death, and just dies suddenly. The planning for that death is different than planning in what you do if someone died in an accident, or somebody had a terminal illness that was that had gone on for years. How you administer them would be different. What you would do for them would be different. But regardless of how they die or how you would die, if you have the plan in place ahead of time, it doesn't matter how you die. The plan will take over and help you, help your family continue on in a way that will be beneficial to them. And so how a person dies can affect your planning to some degree, but if the plan's in place, it can also help the family move on as well. Now, it's better to pre-plan for death than to react to it later. Why is that? Reacting to death is more emotional and can cause mistakes to be made when there's no pre-planning. So let's say you didn't plan for your death and suddenly you die. People are reacting to that because of their emotions, and everybody has different types of emotions. And listen, never forget this, everybody handles death differently. I've learned that in my lifetime. Everybody handles death differently, emotionally, physically, at times, spiritually as well. So I have found that when there's been pre-planning, there's less mistakes made. When people haven't pre-planned, there's more mistakes made. Why? Because now you're flying kind of by the seat of your pants. You've never been through this before. You don't know what to do. And people are giving you all this information, and you're trying to still get through your emotions of somebody dying. And then you throw that together, and it's tough. That's where mistakes can be made. Pre-planning takes away the emotion, and better decisions are usually made. Pre-planning takes away the emotion and better decisions are usually made. Discussions are usually better thought out when you're pre-planning. Discussions are usually better thought out. Why? You're going back and forth talking about it when you're pre-planning. When pre-planning, the plan becomes the good guy or the bad guy. Let me explain. If you get everything in writing, you say you pre-plan for your death. You say you're married, husband and wife, and you pre-plan for that, or even if you're single. Whatever you come to the conclusion of doing and want to have done, and you put that on paper for people behind that are left behind, the paper becomes the good guy or the bad guy. That takes the personality out of it. So instead of people attacking the person, disagreeing with the person, you're looking at a piece of paper you're disagreeing with. So if when I die, say I die before the rapture of the church, and I got everything pre-planned, things going to happen for Pastor Kim, and there's people within our families that don't like it, she doesn't become the bad guy, the paper does. Are you hearing me? In her discussion, well, this is what we discussed, and it's what we want, it's what he wanted, and it's what we're doing. Well, I don't like that. Well, tough. This isn't about you, this is about us. Say, you can pre-plan your death. And if you leave behind, they'll carry out your wishes and what you want to do. Say, so the plan itself becomes the good or bad guy, and that helps to depersonalize, and that helps keep the fighting within the family down. Any plan needs to be in writing until the final plan has been approved. You need to put it in writing. And this day and age, it's probably easier to put it on a computer in a Word document to do it. And we'll go through some of the things that should be included in the plan, some things for you to think about. Any plan can always be changed. No matter you put it in writing, it can always be changed. So just say you pre-plan your desk, and then later down the road you think, oh, I don't want to do that, I'd rather do this. You can go in and change it. You can always change it. And that's good news. Plans need to be specific and very detailed. Specific and detailed. If you're married, both spouses should be involved in the planning. And if you're single, the beneficiary should be involved in any planning. If you're single, the beneficiary to your estate or to the things you have, they should be involved in the planning as well. Now, getting started pre-planning. We're going to go for this time right now, the same time as the message, and assume that this is for married people. Before you start pre-planning, pray. Pray together. Pray before you start and ask for God's direction. You want God's direction in this. Not just your own ideas, but His direction. Find a time to sit down with no distractions. When you're going to have this discussion as a spouse, sit down at a time where there can be no interruptions. You don't answer your cell phone. You don't do text messages. You don't answer emails. You and her and him have each other's total attention, no interruptions. None. I suggest not meeting for more than an hour or two at the most the first time you meet, and do it. Don't try to do everything in one session. 1 hour focus on something like this, you can get a lot done in an hour, maybe 2 at the max. Then step away from it and come back a day or 2 later and have another discussion. Keep doing that until you have the plan in writing, until you have something that you both agree on. That's important. In doing that, you're going to discuss, take one person at a time. And doesn't that person decide how they want to handle their death, how they want their death handled? Once you get through that person, then start later with the other person. Write down your desires. What desires do you have that you want to see fulfilled when you die? The more detail you have in the plan, the better it's going to be. Now, there's some guidelines that can help you. There's a thing that, this thing had different names. You can Google all this, but you can Google a funeral checklist online, and you'll see a bunch of them you can pick from. Usually funeral homes, churches have probably some of the best resources to give you a packet or a guideline to follow to make sure everything's done when you're planning for a death of a family member. In this case, let's say a spouse, we said. As I said before, don't try to complete the plan in one session. Take your time and come back later to it. Don't rush through it. And nothing is insignificant. Nothing's insignificant in the plan. Everything has significance to it. Nothing is insignificant. Remember that. Every detail is important. Now this one, I want to talk to really the guys here, but I'd also like to talk to women. In marriages, we know how the Bible has set up marriage, and we know that it's a pairing together, two people that God's brought together. We get married, and as a husband and wife, the husband should be covering the wife covering the husband in prayer, helping each other. We also know there's always a leader in the family. The Bible says basically that a husband should be leading the family. Sometimes some families you have a wife leading the family. I want to say this to you. Well, no matter which way it goes, because sometimes women have strong personalities and men don't. Sometimes men have strong personalities and the women don't. Sometimes you have two strong ones, and they have two that aren't so strong. Whatever the case may be in your case, don't force somebody to agree with you mentally. I did that years ago in my first marriage, not knowing I was doing it, where I was forcing my will onto my wife and didn't realize I was actually doing it. So I just had a little bit of a stronger personality as she did. And later I found out when I thought she was in agreement with some things weren't working, and I found out she was in agreement because I was forcing her to mentally agree with me, but not to be in agreement with me in her heart. So you don't want to force mental agreement and say, I gotta have this, and your spouse say, okay, and they're not really saying okay in their heart, they're saying okay up here in order to get you off their back. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So make sure you get agreement in the heart, not a forced agreement from the head. That's really important. Matthew 18:19 says, I will also tell you this, if two of you agree here on earth agree concerning anything you ask, my Father in heaven will do it for you. That's the New Living Translation. So there's nothing more powerful than a husband and wife being in agreement. I believe the strongest agreement you have on the earth is between a husband and wife. So just make sure it's heart agreement, not a forced agreement. Does that make sense? And here's some useful tools you can have in place as you prepare for death to help you with it. I'm not saying you have to have all these. I'm saying you got to pray and decide which way God's directing you. But these are some things to think about. One tool is life insurance. And, life insurance comes in a lot of different ways. If you're employed by somebody, you might get life insurance through your employment. You might buy it outside the employment. A lot of ways you can have it. But there's one thing about life insurance for you to consider. I can remember when in Tulsa when we had a we call it a 3-2 house, 3 bedroom, 2 baths, or the first house we owned. And then we bought another house. Next house had 5 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. We went from 1,400 square feet to just under 3,000. And as soon as I called my insurance agent and told him we had closed on a new house, he said to me, you know what that means, Jere? I said, no, Bill, what does that mean? He said, you need to come see me. And I said, why? He said, you need to protect the house. You're going to need more life insurance. So the previous house, when we bought it for like, what did we buy that one? We bought that one for, that's hard to believe. Back in that day, we bought it for, I think, $76,000.
Wow. Gee.
Okay, that was back in 1985. And the new house we bought for $188. So there's what, $110,000 difference.
Mm-hmm.
So my life insurance at that time covered the $77,000 house, but not the $188,000. So I went from policy, I think if I remember right, that had around $100,000 up to one that had $250,000. So it's going to cost me more to have the nicer house, but he said, you have to protect that asset. If you die, you want that house paid off.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense, doesn't it? A lot of people don't think that way. Mm-hmm. Now, here's something I tell younger people, and it could be older people, particularly younger people. And I've told my kids this. I'll tell my grandkids this. I learned this the hard way, and that's this: if a couple is living on 2 incomes, and it takes two incomes to do what they do financially, and it takes those 2 incomes. Without both of them, you can't do what you're doing. Then you need to consider, if you own a house, taking out mortgage insurance. We had an opportunity to do that years ago. Most of us assume the husband's going to die before the wife. And when we had, I can remember when we got when we went to a bigger house, the thing that, besides the life insurance, that when we went to sign the papers, they asked us, do you want mortgage insurance? And for us, it literally took both of our combined incomes. Mine came from different sources, her came really from one. But it took all that together to do what we were doing financially. And we just said, no, we don't need that. Assuming we had enough life insurance on me, and she had a little bit on her from work. I think she had a $35,000 policy at work. And we declined it. But before we declined, I kept feeling in my heart, this push, you should get this. And we didn't want to pay the extra money to do it, right? Well, in my situation, I didn't outlive my wife. My wife died at the age of 52. Had I done it, my house would have been paid off. I did do it, and it wasn't. And yet the whole time the Holy Spirit was tugging my heart, and I ignored it, not knowing what was ahead, just assuming I would die before she did. So that's why I advise young couples, if it takes both of you, both your incomes, do what you do financially, you need to consider mortgage insurance. Don't assume. Some say, well, it's just wasted money. I can tell you what, I wish I'd have done it and paid the extra money and had the house paid off. It'd have been different for me financially and for us later financially. So think about that. All financial accounts that you have, make sure they're joint, both your names are on them. Make sure there's beneficiaries to them. One thing we did when my mom was getting the last couple of years of her life, took everything out of her name. Yeah, kept her name on one investment account, but sold her house, got her into an apartment, took the title of the car, gave to my sister. But all your financial accounts, all of them, make sure you're married. They're on joint accounts, both names are on them. If they're not and you die, there's only one person's name on it, it can be a war to get that account straightened out and get that money to you that you need to have. So make sure you have joint accounts, your name's on everything. Anything with a title on it, anything with a title is something you want to consider. Your votes, vehicles, anything has a title to it, you want both names on it. Both our cars, titles of those cars are and/or on the title, meaning if she would die, I have the cars. If I die, the cars are hers as well. If you don't do that and it's in one person's name, it becomes difficult to get that changed after a person's died. A will is something you might want to consider, but if you have a will by itself, it's going to go to probate court. You have to check on your state. States are different, have differences about probate, but you want to stay out of probate if you can, because if you don't do things to stay out of probate, guess who's going to get a lot of your money? The state is, not your family. That's why we took everything out of my mom's name before she passed away, everything, and kept her on the one investment account, but I was on it with her. And when she died, I called her attorney, told him what we had done, and I said, do we need to go to probate court? He said, and she lived in Texas. He said, no, you've done a great job pre-planning. He said, there's no need to go. There's nothing to probate. When she died, she did not own anything. And I said, that's exactly right. That's why we did that. And so remember that. States are different about probate, but remember that. You might want to consider having a trust. A trust avoids probate court. In the trust owns everything. The individual doesn't own anything. Most people that are wealthy have trust. Most wealthy people don't own anything. They don't own their cars, they don't own the house. Who owns it? The trust does. So you can put everything in the trust. And you have a title to of your accounts. My first wife, when she was a third grade teacher, so on this week, I think back there is teacher appreciation week for all the teachers in the Christian school where she taught. So she'd come out there sometimes with $1,500, $2,000 worth of stuff because parents were thankful for her teaching. Well, she got this envelope, and she opened the envelope because she was teaching this family's son, and it said, free trust. I said, well, what's that? So I told her what trust was. I said, but it says a free trust. I said, well, he's an attorney. He said, yeah, I know that. Well, he's going to do a trust for us at no cost. So we got to contact him. And so we did. So he put together a trust for us And even though she passed away, the trust is still in place for me. And so what we did was every checking account, every account we had, savings, checking, investment, everything went to the trust. That we'll show you some things about a trust in a few minutes. The papers for the house went to the trust. The trust owned the house. The trust owned the cars. The trust owned everything. We own nothing. And what we decided to do on all those accounts, we didn't put on the account, we put your name, like a joint account, Jere and Kim Bell Peterson. We kept our names up there. We didn't put trust account on any of it as far as on the checks themselves. But I still have an account from a stock I hold from a Canadian company, and I've got to change it and get that over to both of us. It's still in the name of the trust, my wife passed away, so I get a dividend check. I need one thing to reinvest, but they kept sending me, they send me about once every quarter a dividend check that we just deposit in our accounts. That still has the trust on it, actually. So in a trust, the trust owns everything. The individual doesn't own anything, and that helps you stay out of probate and keep all that within the family and in your guidelines that you want the trust to have. Most people don't know this, but there's also, in dealing with a trust, there's a piece of paper called an assignment of property that you can put in the trust, and the assignment of property does this. All your furniture, your artwork, your jewelry, anything like that, you name the trust as a beneficiary, and that all goes into the trust when the person dies. And a lot of people don't know that. And it's called an assignment of property. So consider that. Now let's look real quickly at what a trust, the kind of definition of a trust. A trust can be broadly classified into revocable and irrevocable types, further categorized by when they're created, whether living or a testamentary. Their purpose, like charitable, special needs, or asset protection. And let's look first at revocable trust. A revocable trust is a living trust. They're created during the grantor's lifetime and can be changed or revoked. So you can change a revocable trust. And the irrevocable trusts, on the other hand, are set up and cannot be modified after their initial creation. The difference between the two can't be changed. Now, let's just look at some things concerning death again. The death of a loved one can be one of the most devastating events a person goes through in your lifetime, in our lifetime. Planning the end of your life is the most considerate thing you can do for your family, is to plan ahead for them. Grief can be confusing, it can be difficult, overwhelming for families and individuals. Everyone, as I said earlier, handles death differently. Special arrangements help families overcome their grief. So your pre-planning can help people get through the grieving process better because you have taken the time to pre-plan it. Funeral planning guidelines and checklists are there for you to help organize you to get you started. Order of services is important when someone dies. I'll give you an example, some things to think about. When my wife died, we know we're going to have a graveside service. We know we're going to have a service in the church. We call it a celebration of life. And as we talked about, first person I called when my wife died Saturday morning was my pastor. I wanted him to know first. So I called him around 9:45. Told her she'd gone on. And so we started talking on the phone, and he said, if everybody comes to her celebration of life service that she ever taught, our First Floor Chapel won't handle that kind of crowd. We're going to put this in the main sanctuary. Now, that sanctuary holds almost 5,000 people. And I said, yeah, you're probably right. I wasn't even thinking about that because my emotions were running kind of wild. That's why it's good to have someone like a pastor or someone you can talk to. And he said, we need to put that in the main sanctuary. I never would have thought of that, but he did. I said, I think you're right. And so what I decided to do, the last thing I wanted my kids to go through was going to the graveside last and going home to mom not being there and going home to a meal, whatever he's going to do, afterwards. And so to make it better, we had the graveside service first that morning. Now it's interesting, the church in Tulsa that she worked at and I worked at, and she worked in Christian school, its name was Victory Christian Center, Victory. And it's called Victory Church now, but that was the name of the church. And during that graveside service, to show you what God will do, we had family there. I had some ministers that came in from out of town. We told them about it. We had that early in the morning. I think we had that around, if I remember right, I think we had that around 10 o'clock. And so we got through that graveside service. And at the end of it, there's always a bunch of geese at that cemetery. They flew over us in a V. And we saw that, everybody just stopped and went, wow, look what God's doing right now. A V for victory. That she has attained her victory and now is in heaven with him. So you can see some supernatural things that can happen during a process or during a service, during a celebration as well. So what we did was, I determined, had that first. Now we go back to the church, held a celebration of life, which will be longer, and the church catered in food for us afterwards at the church. And so the last thing the kids were going to have to do was go see the celebration of life service, have catered food for our family and our friends. We invited to that as well, and kind of an uplifting moment at that dinner, and not be the last thing, be the gravesite. For us, we felt that worked better. For you, it might be the opposite, but for us, that seemed to work better for us. And I think the kids did better because of that as well, as tough as it is. Remember this, when they die, this person dies, the date of the funeral or the celebration of life, it's going to be important to you. Don't have it too soon, particularly if you have people that need to get there from out of town. If you got people that have to fly in, give them time to get tickets. My wife died on a Saturday. We had all the services, I believe I'm right, on Friday, the following Friday. We had the viewing on, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, we had the viewing on Thursday night. So to get people time to get airline tickets. The shorter the time frame, usually the more expensive the ticket is. If you ask the airline for a special because someone died, they'll give you a small discount. It's usually not much, but they will if you ask for it, okay? But you have to call in and ask for that. You can't do that online normally. So giving family members time to travel, closure is needed for the family, so don't put it too far down the calendar. Don't wait too long. I've seen people wait a month or two. That's too long. Because that month, people's grieving and all that gets more tangled up and it makes it harder on people. So give yourself enough time for people to come, but not so much time that it prevents closure so people can move on with their life. Special services are important. If someone's just cremated and you want their ashes scattered, that timing is important. It's a different kind of service. I was asked to do that I helped do a funeral service. Some friends of ours that live in Pennsylvania, we went to Pennsylvania and did that service, did the graveside, and then she wanted her ashes scattered in the ocean. And so the family picked out a date. We went around 5 o'clock when there would be nobody at the beach, and had a little service, and her grandson took her ashes out and put them in the ocean. And so, those type of services are different, but you can, again, do what the family wants to do in a right way to help that along. Closure is when the final service is over. Closure doesn't happen for anybody until that final service is over. It should be designed to start the process to help people move on, individually and collectively as a family. Now, let's talk for a minute about God's cycle of life for people. God has a cycle of life for us here on the earth. Number one, we're born here on the earth and we have a natural life. We're born. Secondly, we live on the earth. For whatever time we live here, whether it's a year or whether it's 100 years, we live here on the earth for a while. I told you the Holy Spirit spoke to me a few weeks ago about, Jere, did you know that only 1% of your total being is spent on the earth? I was shocked.
Wow.
And I said, what? He said, only 1% of your total lifespan is spent here on the earth.
1%.
Because after you die, he said, eternity is much, much bigger than this. He said, that's why I called it in my word. It's like a vapor that comes and goes. Imagine that. Thirdly, in God's life cycle, there's death on the earth. Unless you're raptured out of here, it comes back to the church. And if you're not raptured out here for the church, you're going to die here on the earth. Bible says it's appointed for man to die once. And then fourthly, in his cycle of life, the last one's eternity. When Christians die, we go to heaven. When non-Christian people die, they will eventually end up forever in hell, both for eternity. That's why I tell people, believers and unbelievers alike, do you realize you will live forever? Do you realize that? I've had people around me jokingly in the last month it's amazing when you prepare for a message in a series, how God brings things to you. I had so many people in earshot of overhearing saying, well, I know I'm going to hell, and then laugh about it.
Wow.
And I always say to them, you don't want to go there. And usually they never answer me back. And if they do, they give me time to share heaven with them and where all heaven and hell are, and hopefully lead them to the Lord. But I've heard that so much in the last couple of months. Oh, yeah, I know I'm going to hell. No big deal. They have no clue where they're headed and why it is a big deal. Now, here's some planning end-of-life events. Some planning end-of-life events. You got to decide the type of disposition that you're going to have. And you're going to have a burial, a cremation, scattering of ashes. What are you going to have? You have to decide that. And that's why when you pre-plan this helps. So what kind of disposition of the body you're going to do? What type of gathering you're going to have? What type of visitation? Private visitation or public? What type of viewing are you going to have? Private or public or both? Casket. Is it going to be open or is it going to be closed? Now, I've had people ask me for recommendations on these, and this is based on family. Family can make these decisions. God's not going to say anything in the word that's hardcore on this. I believe, this is just me talking, and as a pastor, if people ask me which one I prefer a closed casket. And there's a reason for that. I don't want the last image in my head or their head to be what they see in that casket. Because the funeral home will do a great job of making that person look good if they can, as long as there hasn't been, a bad accident that just completely destroys their face. But that's not what the real person really looks like. All the makeup they do to try to present that person in a very nice way, they do a great job. But I don't want that to be the last image my kids or grandkids have, is that. That's why I prefer a closed casket. I say that in telling you that my wife died in my arms. My son was upstairs sleeping, so he came down and saw Mom after she died. My daughter was in Tulsa house watching. She came over that morning to see her mom. 2 boys were out of town. By the time they got to Tulsa, my wife's body had been taken out of the house, was in storage. I took them to the storage place, and they saw Mom. So for us, it didn't make any sense having an open casket. She had a sister and brothers. They never saw her in the casket because it was closed. When they came in, we had a public viewing on a Thursday night, and we did an open casket. She had all these, because she had died of melanoma cancer. All these tumors had popped up over her body in the last week. Now, they would have disguised all that. She went, she was under 90 pounds when she died. I didn't want anybody to see her like that. So that wasn't really the real her. Does that make sense? So my preference for people is have a closed casket, but if they want it open, that's up to them. There's no hardcore thing God says to do on this. You make that decision. But see, this is where pre-planning comes in. You decide ahead of time, you and your spouse, it's done, and no one's going to argue about it. And this is what the desire was. Anybody ever challenge you on it privately, you can tell them, no, this is what we decided, this is what we're going to do. But those are the type of things you have to decide on. The celebration of life service. Some people call them funerals. I like to call them, I prefer celebration of life. You need to personalize it. I think one of the best things you can do for a family is, for the celebration of life service, is try to get them to have a video put together by somebody. So put the video together, have them sit down at their kitchen table, bring all the pictures they have and pour them out. Nowadays you have most of them electronically on your phones and stuff, and pick out the pictures you want in a video. If there's somebody real techie in the family, let them put the video together to some music and show that at the celebration of life. I would say, don't make it more than, 6, 7, 8 minutes. You can do a lot in 6 or 7, 8 minutes on a video. If it gets too long, people start losing interest in it. So I think 6 to 8 minutes is good. But what I have found is when you have families sit down and go through the photos together privately, they start reliving those pictures and those times. And because I think it kind of helps me start the healing process. It helps them get through the grieving. And it goes from this heavy thing to laughter around the table. You remember when mom did this or when dad did this? And so it brings a lot of healing when they do that. And so I would say really consider having a video and let the family put together the photos and let them go through that process of them doing that, not you doing it ahead of time. But you can put down in your planning that you want them to do that because that will help them. They may not know they need help, but that will help them later, believe me. You're going to have to decide location of the funeral or location of the celebration of life service, who's going to speak, clergy, pastors, family. Now, I'm going to share this with you. I saw a great man of God, T.L. Osborne, world renowned. His wife died. He had somebody read a letter he had written for her funeral service. I saw that, said, if that ever happened to me, I'm going to do that. I don't think I get up and talk about my wife without bawling and crying and not getting through it. So time came, and Pastor called me and said, Jerry, I'm going to send over staff member. You guys can go the order of service that you want for the celebration of life. Just make sure that you're the last one to talk. And I said, Pastor, I'm not talking. I'm going to do what TL did. I'm going to have somebody read something. He said, no, Jerry, don't do that. And I said, I don't even get through it. There's no way I can get through that. He said, Jerry, let me tell you something. You only have one shot at this. You'll never have this opportunity again. And there's no one that can talk about her as well as you. So I'm strongly suggesting you reconsider because they need to hear from you. Your family needs to hear from you. Your extended family needs to hear from you. The church needs to hear from you. The Christian school needs to hear from you. You need to speak because you only have one shot at this and you don't want to regret it later. And when after he hung up, I thought, but let me add one more thing you said to me before I hung up. He said, Jerry, God will grace you for this. His grace will be upon you for it. And then he hung up. And I couldn't get away from those words, that God would grace me to do it. And he did. And I did. And I'm so glad I did it. So I've been pastor of this church. I haven't counted. I think we've done, 5 or 6 funerals. And in every time we've gone to help talk to the family in preparation, she'll tell you this. I've said to the family members, everyone, you need to consider speaking at this service because you only have one shot at it and you don't want to regret this later. And I've had them literally tell me, no, we're not doing it. And within 2 minutes, they've come to me, whispered, I'm going to speak. And I always give them an opportunity at the end of it. When we think we're all done, is there anybody else in the family who wants to speak? And you can't believe how many times family members come forward to do that. So remember that for yourself. Think, I can't do that, but you can talk better than anybody else about your spouse. And God will grace you to do it. That will help everybody. Got to go through the order of the service, the songs, sound systems, reception, fellowship meal afterwards. It's going to be catered in. You're going to have potluck, prayers, hymns, live or recorded. You got to get all that in place, all that set ahead of time. Online memorial websites. Most funeral homes have this. And so on that website, you're going to have the obituary. Who's going to write the obituary? You need to sit down as a family side. Who's going to do that? Notes on those online websites that funeral homes have, most of them now, you can leave notes to the family. The obituaries there, the pictures are there of the deceased person, information about them is there. I mean, it's pretty cool you can do that. I had one pop up the other day, I did know someone died. I was able to go into the funeral website and just click in there and leave a note for them, to the family that I knew. Obituary. This is hard to believe in this day and time, but there's still newspapers that are on obituaries. I don't know. I'm not familiar with if there's a Montague News or the Ringwood Journal. I don't know if these two have, if there's one for the whole area. But I guarantee you there's some sort of newspaper publication in this area for something. and you can put an obituary in there, as well as on all the social media sites. But remember this, in your pre-planning, if you do put that into a newspaper or that kind of publication, it's gonna cost you money.
Mhm.
Years ago, they did it free, not anymore. They're gonna charge you the longer the obituary,
Oh,
with the pitch, even with a picture. They'll charge you more for having a picture or not a picture.
wow.
So we put ours on every social media thing we had back then. We put them in the Tulsa World was Tulsa newspaper, a couple of newspapers back in our hometown, in our college town. All that cost money, and it wasn't necessarily cheap. So remember that in your pre-planning. Memorial contribution. Some people like to have contributions financially given to a memorial. Nothing wrong with that. If that's what the family has done. I see a lot of people say in lieu of flowers, give to American Cancer Society. If that's what the pre-planning said, fine. If it wasn't, it's up to family members. I personally would not want people to contribute to something like that or some other charitable thing for me. Why? Unless you can find a charitable organization that I agree to pre-plan for, that 100% of the money goes to them. There's too many of them, 95% goes to administrative costs, and less than 5% goes to the cause. And so you give money to administrative people and not to the cause. And people say, well, flowers are a waste of money. I say this, what do flowers produce when you see a flower? What's it produce?
Beauty.
Beauty. What else?
Growth, fragrance.
Growth, fragrance, what else?
Life,
What else?
happiness.
Happiness.
Has more seeds.
More what?
Has more seeds.
More seeds for more flowers. So it's a happy thing, right? As long as they bring off somewhat joy. You can't put a price on doing that at a funeral or at a celebration of life service. That's why every time they say lieu of flowers, when we've even done services, and we've been pastors here, we still send them. We will not send flowers. Even when the time says we don't want them, we still send them. We like to do the very thing you just said that happens, to bring joy to people,
Plants.
to lift them up.
Even a plant.
You know, and sometimes a plant, because a plant's longer lasting.
Yeah.
We've sent plants before. Sometimes after we sent flowers, we'll send a plant later. And, so you can plant the plant around their house. So it's something to think about. Nothing's right, nothing's wrong, so whatever you decide. I asked the remaining spouse, did your wife or did your husband like flowers? Yes. Then why would you want them at the service? And they'll say, never thought about that. Just all this waste of money. But no, you're right. She loved flowers, or he loved flowers. And have them. You gotta choose a final resting place for your body. Usually nowadays, most people just send that cemetery. You can't do it in private land if you desire to do that. Just know this. Cemeteries are owned by either two things nowadays: corporations or families. And the price difference can be staggering. In Tulsa, every cemetery in the Tulsa area is owned by a corporation but one. So I researched the one that wasn't and researched 3 of the other ones that were. And the place I thought about going back there, and that was back in 2008, would have cost me $15,000 in 2008. The family owned, I went and kind of did a search, who all is in this family-owned cemetery? It's a huge cemetery, big. But who has had themselves buried there? The who's who in Tulsa went to that place. Wayman Teasdale, a great basketball player at the University of Oklahoma, was there. I mean, all these celebrities from Oklahoma were buried there. I thought, they're staying away from the corporations, going to the family-owned business. And the price there, I think it was $7,000.
What?
$7,000. They cut it in half in the family-owned business compared to the corporately-owned business. And I found, for me, looking around, the corporately-owned businesses were a little bit not as friendly as the family-owned business was. So just know there's a difference in the two as you do your research. People like to put jewelry on the deceased one when they're in the casket. Just remember this.
Take it off of the journal.
Remember this. Only put on that body what you're willing to lose. If you're not willing to lose what you put on the body, don't put it on the body. Now, I would say this to you. There's been a lot of stories where people have put jewelry on and somebody took it off before they got buried.
Oh, yeah.
All right? If you're doing a celebration of life and you're doing the graveside last, Jewelry's known to disappear between having the body in the church or the funeral home and not be there when it gets to the gravesite. So unless you eyeball it and watch the casket close and you follow that casket yourself all the way there, you don't know if it's been reopened, someone took the stuff. So don't put anything in that body that you are not willing to lose. Okay? A couple more things real quickly here before we bring this to an end this morning. Does this help anybody?
Yeah,
Come stir some thoughts for you.
yeah.
Choose a payment method when you're planning. Choose a way to pay for it. There's funeral insurance that locks in prices sometimes. There's a funeral trust, you can pay on death accounts, all that, or you just pay cash. It's not wrong to ask family members to help pay for expenses, to allow friends to help if they wish. There's sites to help raise money, GoFundMe. You can do a GoFundMe thing if money's a problem, ucarry.com. We went to NIH for my wife for a treatment. They had a place I could go. This was wonderful. I forget the name of it. These places like NIH, places like Cancer Research of America, MD Anderson, they had these places that you can go. And so I had all these people want to know how she was doing. I just found this site they sent me to, put her name in there, set up an account, and I just put the doctor's report and sent it. It'd go to all her friends. All her friends, they could access it through the website.
Wow.
Instead of sending out 100 emails, I sent out one. Made my life a whole lot easier. So that's available to you. Buying cemetery plots. I would say buy both spouses ahead of time. You're going to pay for the plots, pay for the opening and closing ahead of time. They charge you to open the grave, to close the grave, pay for that. Get your headstone paid for ahead of time. Put you on that headstone ahead of time. Get it all done. Get it all done. The only thing on the headstone in Tulsa is we're both on there, and the only thing left is there's no date on my day of death. Everything else is on there. That wasn't pre-planned. I was flying by the seat of my pants on that one. So pre-plan it. You can get the headstone done. Collect the important documents. Copy of your will, the trust, if you have it, marriage and birth certificates. If they're a veteran, discharge papers, military service records, life and health insurance policies, social security numbers and information, financial records, maiden names, mom and father full names, and much more. Just to give you an idea of stuff you're going to need. Emergency contacts. Have at least 2 people beside your spouse as emergency contacts. Why? What happens if your spouse isn't available? Something happens to your spouse. Place of employment. How long? The awards they got, the contacts there. Highest level education completed, degrees, honors, activities, pallbearers. Who's going to be the pallbearer? How many are you going to have, and all that. It's going to be helpful. It's going to be helpful. Now, I'm going to go through with you some things. We talked about trust for just a moment. We got this, well, last thing to go through here before we close it. What should be included in a trust? If you decide a trust, what should be included? The declaration of the trust, number 1. It outlines the purpose, the terms, and conditions of the trust. Number 2, a living will. A living will is inside the trust. Thirdly, transfer documents of assets. Transfer documents of assets. All your assets are going to be transferred into the trust. The durable power of attorney. Who's going to have power of attorney? Advanced health directives, like DNRs, do not resuscitate. Some people don't want to be resuscitated in certain situations. They say, just let me go. That can be included in the trust. Your advanced health care directives. Also your financial directives, how things will be handled financially should be in the trust. The trustees, the executors, beneficiaries, all need to be named, plus 2 other people at least. How the assets are going to be managed, how they're going to be distributed upon death of the person. An HIPAA authorization. This basically means who is a trust going to allow us to have access to the private medical and health information to be shared with other medical people. A quit claim deed is used to transfer ownership of real estate to the trust. The pour-over will. It works with the living trust, directs any assets not already in the trust to be transferred to the trust after the grantor's death. So after the grantor's death, the pour-over will brings in all the assets that are not in the will upon the death, they're transferred into the trust. And then copies of the entire trust to all the trustees, all the executors, or the executor, and it should be on file with a certified attorney and a lawyer. Romans 8:14, for all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. Let God lead you in planning for your death. Let God lead you in it. He'll show you things about your family you may not even know, things you need to do that would be important to you. 1 John 4:16, we know how much God loves us and we have put our trust in his love. God is love. All who live in love live in God and God in them. So God's love is a basis of all that we do. Does that make sense? You know how much he loves us. We put our trust in that love. He is love, and all who love in God, God is love in them. God's love will never fail you. As you're planning for your death, God's love will help direct you and will not fail you. And lastly, Matthew 6:33, seek the kingdom of God above all else. Live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. Seek God in preparing for death. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Make sure you do that. Let God lead you. You know God's love will never fail you as you pre-plan, and seek God preparing for your death. Oh, you're watching by video. Thanks for watching today. Remember this. Whatever you do in pre-planning helps those that remain behind, and it will be easier for you than if you don't. God bless you. Remember, Jesus is Lord. Did this help anybody today?
Amen.
Start the thinking process on some things?